Before the first bomb landed, your grocery bill was already about to change. In 2026, a single exchange of fire near the world's most critical oil choke point halted 21% of global oil flow within 72 hours. But the economic damage that followed was not caused by missiles. It was caused by paperwork. This video will show you exactly how a clause in a marine insurance policy triggered a global supply chain seizure that military planners, economists, and government wargamers had never fully modeled. By the time most people understood what was happening, it was already too late to hedge against it. To understand March 3, 2026, you need to understand the structure of global shipping. Every commercial vessel that enters a high-risk waterway carries war risk insurance. Without it, the vessel cannot legally dock at most major ports. Its cargo cannot be financed. Its crew cannot be insured. War risk coverage is not optional. It is the invisible permission slip that keeps global trade moving. And for decades, the Persian Gulf's war risk premiums were manageable. Expensive, but manageable. The system had absorbed the Iran-Iraq tanker war of the 1980s, the 2009 Gulf of Oman incidents, and years of Houthi disruption in the Red Sea. The market had always found a price. What the market had never found was a price for full-scale interstate conflict, involving ballistic missiles, naval mines, and the declared closure of a strait carrying 1/5 of the world's oil supply. On February 18, 2026, Brent crude surged to $187 per barrel within 48 hours of the first confirmed exchange of fire, the fastest single-week oil price spike since 1973. The cracks in this system were visible well before the first missile was fired. Energy analysts had documented for years that Iran's economic position had deteriorated sharply. By the time conflict broke out, Iran's central bank held only an estimated $4 billion in accessible foreign reserves, down from approximately $120 billion in 2017. That figure, drawn from public economic assessments and reporting by international financial institutions, meant the Iranian government had almost no buffer. No ability to sustain food import subsidies. No ability to stabilize its currency under pressure. The country was, in the language of economists, already operating without a safety net before the first shot was fired. Some analysts had also raised concerns years earlier about the systemic exposure of global shipping insurance to a Gulf conflict scenario. A 2023 Lloyd's Market Association risk review, cited in subsequent industry reporting, flagged the Persian Gulf as the single largest concentration of war risk liability in the global marine insurance market. The question that review asked, what happens if underwriters face simultaneous, unquantifiable exposure across the entire zone, was never fully answered in public. Until March 3, 2026, when it answered itself. Here is what no war simulation had adequately modeled. The economic rupture did not begin when cargo ships were hit. It began when Lloyd's of London and 14 major marine insurers suspended Persian Gulf war risk policies entirely. Not raised premiums, suspended. Coverage ceased to exist at a price any commercial operator could absorb. And in that moment, 340 vessels carrying an estimated $9.2 billion in cargo stopped moving. Not because they were ordered to stop. Not because ports were closed. Because without insurance, moving meant financial and legal exposure that no shipping company would accept. The seizure spread outward from the Gulf in concentric rings. Ships that had not yet entered the Strait of Hormuz turned around. Ships already in transit anchored and waited. Ships scheduled to depart from Asian ports delayed loading. The Asia to Europe shipping route via the strait was effectively closed, not by military force, but by the withdrawal of a financial instrument. Vessels that could reroute did, taking the Cape of Good Hope route around the southern tip of Africa. That detour added 18 to 22 days to delivery schedules and pushed freight rates up 480% by April 2026. The additional cost per container on that route reached an estimated $14,000, a figure that would eventually appear in the price of electronics, pharmaceuticals, automotive components, and consumer goods across Europe and Asia. $9.2 billion in cargo stranded, 340 vessels anchored. 0 shots fired at a single one of them. Inside Iran, the economic compression was immediate and severe. The Iranian rial, which had already been under sustained pressure from years of sanctions, lost an estimated 61% of its remaining value against the dollar between February and May 2026. Domestic bread prices in urban centers rose by approximately 340% over the same period, according to reports from international humanitarian monitoring organizations. Within 6 weeks of conflict onset, the government's ability to subsidize basic food imports had effectively collapsed. These are not projections. These are figures drawn from public reporting and economic monitoring in the period following the outbreak of hostilities. The populations absorbing this damage were not the architects of the conflict. They were factory workers in South Korea waiting for automotive parts. They were families in Germany watching energy bills spike past any historical reference point. They were Iranian citizens standing in lines outside bakeries in cities where the price of a loaf of bread had tripled in 8 weeks. The mechanism that transferred damage from a military exchange in the Persian Gulf to a supermarket shelf in Lyon or a fuel pump in Jakarta was not a missile. It was an insurance suspension clause, a freight rate index, and a currency collapse. 3 instruments that interact at speed no military response can match. What 2026 demonstrated at severe cost is that the most consequential vulnerabilities in the global economy are not military. They are structural. They live in insurance frameworks, shipping route dependencies, and reserve currency exposures that rarely appear in defense budget hearings or national security briefings. The lesson is not that war causes economic damage. Every generation already knows that. The lesson is that the economic rupture can precede and outlast the military exchange, and that the populations with the least protection from financial volatility absorb the greatest share of the damage, regardless of which side their government is on. This video is educational analysis based on publicly available information. It does not assert conclusions about political responsibility or military conduct beyond what has been publicly established. Here is the question I keep coming back to. If the suspension of a single insurance market can freeze $9.2 billion in cargo and trigger a 480% freight rate spike without a single commercial vessel being struck, what other invisible switches in the global financial system are sitting in similar positions right now? And does your government know where they are?